Hey guys, Outdoor Gypsy here. If you guys enjoy stuff like this as much as we do, then join us on our trek along the Greenway Trail from Mt Monadnock to Mt Sunapee. For those of you interested in a little bit more detail on this trek, stay tuned until the very end of the video and I will be sharing my thoughts, tips, tricks, things you may want to know before you come out on this adventure. Let's get some nature love. All right guys, day one in the books here. Monadnock to this beautiful open meadow where we're gonna set up camp. Obviously, as you can see, the light is fading and we're, I think, a long ways away from the next lean-to or open camp spots, for which there are not a lot around this trail. So we're gonna pick this meadow just off the road a little bit. Looks as though we can legally camp here. Looks hiker and backpacker friendly, just no motorized vehicle. So beautiful area to set up camp. I think you guys will agree. But the hike today, absolutely phenomenal. Just straight up, straight down to get up and down Monadnock. But after that, just a beautiful stroll or a little jaunt in the woods. Out here for foliage season, and it's beautiful. Trees are starting to turn a little bit. They're not quite in peak, but they're getting close. And day one, a lot of fun. Good morning. Day 3, coming at you from our makeshift campsite here on the side of King Street. We put in a soft 20 miles yesterday until we pretty much ran out of daylight, and then we're kind of forced to set up camp here. One thing I will say is the campsites and lean-tos are far and few between on this trail, so if you have opportunities, take them. We're at 35 miles total for the trip. Looks like we have another 20 or so to go. Today we're going to try and get up and down Mt Sunapee for the final day. The weather is looking like it'll be absolutely perfect, so that, along with the further we push, the better the foliage has been getting, should help with the morale. We'll see you at the end. Super glad to see your car right now. Good trip.
Oh, trip.
Heck yeah, guys. 54 miles down. Another adventure in the books. Sun gleaming down on us right now to end this great day, to end this great trip. Super glad that we did it, but I am super glad that we are done. My feet are roasted. Gonna check out right now, go grab a burger and a beer. If you guys enjoyed this video, you know what to do. I'll see you guys around. Welcome back, everybody. I'm going to be going through as much information as I can for you right now in as little of time as possible. Let's start with some of the technicals on this trip. The listed distance here is 50.5 miles with an elevation gain of 9,900 feet. When I actually recorded this when we were hiking it, my watch told me we went 55 miles and 11,200 feet. I would personally plan or recommend for around 55 to 60 miles, maybe even a tiny bit more, with an elevation gain of around 12,000 feet, just because there's a lot of different variations in this hike that you can do, along with a lot of different side treks. This hike is a point-to-point hike, meaning you are going to have two cars, one at the north, one at the south end, or you are going to have to arrange ahead of time to either have somebody drop you off or pick you up. My brother and I did this where we had two different cars. We left one at the northbound parking lot and we left one at the southbound parking lot. Keep in mind, in order to have the overnight permits, you are going to have to pay $15 to park your car at the Monadnock or the southbound parking lot, and I think it was $3 or $4 to park at the northbound or the Sunapee parking lot. Let's talk about the actual trail itself. The Greenway Trail is extremely well marked. You will see a bunch of little white circles or white rectangles primarily that are going to guide you along the trail. You will see them on trees, telephone poles, and when you are walking along some of the old logging roads or the roads in between towns, you will actually see a Greenway written out on it with an arrow pointing you in the correct direction. Just keep your head up and keep your wit about you, and it will be very difficult to get lost on this trail. The terrain along the Greenway Trail is all over the place. When you're hiking on the old logging roads and the roads in between town, it's obviously going to be very flat and easy and nice on your feet. But then if you are hiking on the true hiking trails, so to say, it is going to be very undulating, rocky, rooty. This is New England, so it's going to likely be wet and slippery as well. If you are coming and doing this hike from the west, just be prepared. It's going to be very different. If you are obviously doing this from New England, it will be nothing new to you, just almost like if you're hiking in the Adirondacks. The one question every backpacker always wants to know is, are there plenty of water resupply stations? The generic answer to that question is yes, with the one exception being the last 15 to 20 miles of this trail if you are heading from south to north. Otherwise, the first 2/3 to 3/4 of this hike, there is going to be plenty of creeks, streams, lakes, ponds, reservoirs, and everything in between. There are a decent amount of camping spots or lean-tos here on the Greenway Trail, but I personally found for my situation that they were spread way too far from where I wanted to set up camp. Again, my brother and I did this in 3 days and 2 nights. So if you were to do this in maybe 3, 4, or 5 nights, I think that it would have lent itself better in that situation. But for us, if you're doing 15 or 20 miles, I find that we were just really far in between where the lean-tos or the designated campsites were set up. With that said, I think there are 5 or 6 actual lean-tos, and there is one designated campsite or platform called Fox Creek. You'll see different signage here along the trail periodically that will show you roughly where the lean-tos are, as you can see here. When my brother and I were doing this trip, we kind of got caught with our pants down a little bit. Again, we were trying to push pretty far distances, 15 or 20 miles. Where the lean-tos were set up, again, we were just really far in between them. So for night one, we were kind of forced to camp in this open field, which in hindsight worked out beautifully because we found this sign right here that pretty much says, from my interpretation, that as long as you don't have a motorized vehicle here, you are free to hike and enjoy this as part of just a natural preserve of sorts. So I think we did it legally. We set up camp here and it was just absolutely great. Another thing to make mention here, a lot of people want to know how bad were the bugs, right? You're out in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes the bugs can get pretty bad. If you do this in spring or summer, the bugs are going to be pretty bad. My brother and I did this more at the end of summer and early fall. There were a handful of mosquitoes, but overall the bugs were pretty minimal at this time. All right, let's talk about some of the highlights and the lowlights of this trip. My brother and I did this from September 30th through October 2nd. The reason we elected to do this time frame was we're trying to catch the early parts of fall. I think we accomplished that. It wasn't quite peak, but I do think that we got a decent amount of fall foliage, especially the further north we went. For most people, going up and down Mt Monadnock is going to likely be the biggest highlight, and arguably so. When you're up at the top, you have panoramic views, and at this time of year, of all the fruity pebble colors on all of the trees. When we got here and we went up and down Mt Monadnock, the night before it had rained its butt off, so when we got up there was a lot of low-lying clouds and fog, which kind of stole away a little bit of the intrigue from being up at the top of Monadnock and those views. I think the next highlight, at least if you're doing it at this time of year, has to be the fall foliage. The peak season that I think happens here in New England, now this is very dependent on conditions in summer and a lot of other variables, but it is typically from October 1st through October 15th, with I think the absolute bullseye usually being from October 8th through the 15th and 18th, somewhere in that general area. One of the big highlights for me personally on this trip was the different type of backpack trip that this was. What I mean by that is, again, I usually hike out west in California, Oregon, and so on and so forth, but in New England, I find that you do a hike, you go up a mountain, you kind of come back down and you scoot through a little bit of New England towns, and you kind of get to see the local architecture, some of the local houses, and it just gives this really cool, quaint New England vibe, and it's just a different way of backpacking that I really appreciated because it was very different for me. I think it would be foolish not to mention as one of the highlights, the mushrooms, the moss, the lichen around here. It's absolutely beautiful. At least this time of year, it's a little bit damper and wet, and it brings out all these beautiful mushrooms. As you can see, these are just the ones that I had taken pictures of. I'm not about to try and give you the names on these. I am not an expert on mushrooms. So if you are foraging for them here, make sure you understand what you are looking for, have a field guide, and just be safe. One of the other final highlights I think to this trip was this has got a lot of different placards that kind of point out like, hey, this was so-and-so's house and this is the history to it. And I just really appreciated that.
There were also some various humorous signs along the trail that really just changed your morale on a moment's notice, as you can see right here. And it was just funny, and I just really enjoyed these small little things. And it's amazing how you find these small little things that important while you're backpacking. Another thing I'm gonna put in the highlight section here are the animals of this general area. This is New Hampshire, this is moose country, this is black bear country. While we did not see any, we did see signs that they are present in this area. The actual animals that we did see are 2 or 3 great blue heron. I didn't grab any pictures of them because they were far away. And to be honest, they were in some really densely forested areas that I would never have guessed a great blue heron would actually be in. Other animals that we got to see were a few different toads. If you don't like snakes, close your eyes now, but we got to see a bunch of snakes. We also saw a ton of red-spotted newts and a bunch of these little caterpillars that were just oh so cute. Let's talk lowlights. There aren't many on this trail, but the big one for me is what I like to refer to as almost views. When you're doing long distances like this and you're going up and down and up and down and up and down all of these mountains, it helps so much with the morale when you get to the top and you get to see the views of what you just climbed. In the Northeast in general, definitely on this trail, you get to the top of a lot of these mountains and all you do is get to see more trees. There are a few exceptions to this rule where you get to see just over the tops of the trees and you can see what almost is there. The only time that I found that you could see in its entirety, like panoramic views, is at the top of Mt Monadnock and the fire lookout. The only other lowlight for me would be the terrain. There are some sections that are, again, they're very beautiful, soft on the feet, but there are large sections where you are gonna notice very rocky, rooty, undulating terrain. And what I found that it did is when you do have opportunities to look up and take in the views, you can't because you're so worried about breaking your ankles and falling that you have to look down constantly. A few pearls of wisdom. Make sure you guys take the Overlook Trail to Solitude Lake. It will not disappoint and affords a beautiful picture opportunity. If you are doing this trail from south to north like we had done, just before Solitude Lake, you are gonna notice a little red arrow and the words view painted on the rock. Take it to your right. It's only 1/10 of a mile off the main trail. It will take you no time at all, and it will lead you to arguably the most picturesque view on this trail. All right, guys, that does it for me for now. Again, I am the Outdoor Gypsy. I will see you guys on the next adventure.